Well, welcome to week 3 of James Asking and Receiving. Yeah. So, what I just handed out is a sheet that looks like this, single sheet. It was emailed out. It's just Asking and Receiving week 3. It says, if holiness means, and has some things from last week, and some things from this week, and then I just handed out the main portion of scripture we're going to be working on today, all big, so you can see it right there. Okay, so I was going through my notes for this week and looking over last week, and I did pretty good last week, not to toot my own horn. I drew, we went, and some thoughts, we started here, we went here, we went here, we went all the way back. I didn't point it out to you as clearly as I could have, that we made a thought circle, so I'll try to finish that loop for you a little bit better this week. But last week, I think that I pretty clearly proved that in James you might draw the conclusion that holiness is reproducing exclusively with God. And it's that non-sexual necessarily reproduction. I think it's the reproduction sex is made to teach us about. So it has nothing to do with romance or anything. It's just every time we do anything, we make something. We put something in the world with God. And I think he wants us to do that with him, not with anyone else. So it means reproducing exclusively with God, behaving as though God can, wants to, and will do anything and everything he says he will, and 3, behaving as though God makes only good gifts and the only good gifts. So that's what I said last week. This week, I think we're going to see that holiness is attaching our judgment to our love instead of our anger. That holiness is refusing to continue in a pattern of thinking that leads to bitter envy and selfish ambition. And 3, that behaving as though bitter envy and selfish ambition will follow us wherever we go, so remembering that we continually need to draw near to God so that he can change our motives and the desires of our heart. So I think we're going to see in James this week that that's what holiness means. Okay. So the theme for the class is James asking and receiving. There are 3 times in James where he specifically addresses asking God for something and receiving it or not. This is our second case study of the second incident. It is found in James chapter 4, but we're really looking at James 3:13 all the way through 4:12. I mean, it's one book, so it's all really one thought process, but this is a chunk of that thought process. But the question part says, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You desire but do not have, so you kill. You covet, but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. You do not have, because you do not ask God. When you ask, you do not receive, because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. That's 4:1-3. That says that. It's a specific asking and receiving it. Okay, so first thought on reading that I had was that it is impossible to separate asking and receiving from our emotions. How we feel is going to affect what we ask for, and how we feel is going to affect our response to the answer to that ask. Right? Feelings are involved. Especially listen to this. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You desire, but you do not have. So you quarrel and fight. So if you want something and you don't get it, and then you're quarreling and fighting, name an emotion. What's that emotion? Anger. 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 Yes. So you do not have, and you do not ask God, and when you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives. Anger. Anger is everywhere now. That sounds very angry. Yes. Okay. So I want to talk about anger. Okay. In chapter 1, 19-20, which I did print on the scripture sheet for you, it says, my dear brothers and sisters, this is a very famous verse. Verse 19 is very famous. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Raise your hand if you had that memorized. Or you could spat something out like it. Now raise your hand if you know the next verse. No, it's a very important verse to know because it tells you why. And I had never heard this verse before. And you know what I mean? Like I knew everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. People like to say that to you, memes, all the things. But I did not know that it says, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you which can save you, which, by the way, is very reproductive. If you'll notice, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human righteousness does not produce, it does not put out there into the world the things we're supposed to make with God. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. Okay. Human anger. So this says human anger does not produce the righteousness God desires. So what's the difference between our anger and God's anger? I don't know. So I did some research. I thought a word study would be helpful. But interesting note, you cannot look up which word for anger is used to describe Jesus when he turns over the temples, because it doesn't describe him that way. It doesn't use the word for angry. It doesn't tell us his emotional state. It says he did this. Now, the word for like turn over and like get them out of there, those are words that involve force. They're powerful words, but it doesn't assign an emotion to it, which I thought was fascinating, because I mean, you're mad when you turn over temples. That's how I heard the story. They're being meh. But interesting note, good parents don't hit their kids when they're being fueled by their anger. So that note means that he could have gone in there angry, or he could have gone in there just like, all right, time to sort this out, guys. This is ridiculous. We're not doing this anymore. You know, just like you do with your kids. So maybe he was angry. Maybe he doesn't. I don't know. Also, you can't look up the word for anger used to describe God in the flood Noah's Ark story, because he isn't described that way. You're going to destroy the whole world and we can't tell you you're angry? That's insane. He's not angry there. In that story, he's described as sorry, not angry. Okay, interesting. The first 3 times God is described as angry in the Bible are in Exodus. The first one is Moses at the burning bush, Exodus 4:13 through 17. God has told him 5 times to go and tell Pharaoh to let his people go. And even he gave him a magical stick, and he showed him it would do tricks when he told it to. Like, he's put in some work with this guy in this conversation. And even this last time, he finally tells him, don't make me do this. I can't do this. And it says God is angry. But what I would like to look at is, what does God do when he's angry, and what gets him angry? So in this first one, what does God do when he's angry? Well, it says, let me open it up. I found this fascinating when it comes to God's anger. So in Exodus, where did I say it was? 4:13 through 17. I think I could quote it to you, but let's not test my memory right now. 13 through 17. Okay. So he's been talking to this dude for a while. Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and he said, this is what he does when he's angry. He said, what about your brother Aaron, the Levite? I know he can speak well, and he is already on his way to meet you. Interesting. So when God was angry, he offered a solution that looked like he'd already thought of it before it was even asked for. Interesting. That's why I think that he's actually already coming. If you just would have trusted me, I would have given everything you needed. So, okay. So when he's angry, he provides a solution. But why did he get angry? It seemed to be he was offering himself a relationship. I'm offering myself in relationship to you, Moses. You and me are going to do this thing together. Trust me. Look at this power I'm giving to you. And Moses is like, I don't know. It seems to be the relationship. To me, I think it's the lack of engaging in the trust that causes that anger. So God, when he's angry, he provides a solution, and he's angry because we're not engaging with him. All right, there's one. The second time God is described as angry in the Bible is after they've crossed through the Red Sea. There's a poem about God. He's described as angry in there. And what he's angry about was his people being hurt, being destroyed, right? They were his, and he was angry about them being hurt. So jealousy comes up here. And people don't like God being described as jealous because they think that's petty. But then I just like to say, all right, well, if you're dating someone, you are not married to them, and they go out with someone else and they let you know, hey, I'm going out on Friday with whoever. Okay, whatever. You can feel the emotion jealous if you want to, if you have 0 legs to stand on, right? But if that's your spouse, and now they've told you they're going out to dinner with somebody else and you're jealous, you have all the legs, stand on them. They're yours. It's right. So jealous is right sometimes, but it can also be wrong. And I think we're learning this about anger, because if God's people are his people and they're his to love and they are being hurt, he gets to be angry about that. Okay, so he was in, yeah. All right, so the third time God is described as angry is the whole golden calf incident, where him and Moses were having a chat, and the people in the meantime got all freaked out and started worshiping someone else. They started reproducing with someone else in the desert. And so they cheated on him. And that's why he was mad. But what did he do when he was mad? This is Exodus 32:9. Let's check this one out. 32. Okay. Verse 9. I have seen these people, the Lord said to Moses, and they are a stiff-necked people. Now leave me alone so that my anger may burn against them and that I may destroy them. Then I will make you into a great nation. But Moses sought the favor of the Lord his God. Lord, he said, why should your anger burn against your people whom you brought out of Egypt with great power and a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians say, it is with evil intent that he brought them out to kill them in the mountains and to wipe them off the face of the earth? Turn from your fierce anger, relent, and do not bring disaster on your people. Remember your servants Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, to whom you swore by your own self, I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and I will give you your descendants, all this land I promised them, and it will be their inheritance forever. And then the Lord relented and did not bring on his people the disaster he had threatened. So they did something super bad, and God did 3 very difficult things that are hard for humans to do when we're angry. He sought to communicate about it. Now, I don't know about you men, but I'm probably pretty sure that wives, almost every time you've gotten angry with your husband, you have to have that battle within yourself. Am I going to pout and manipulate, or am I actually just going to go say something about it? Because it can be hard to talk about it when you're angry. I think that's hard to do. He also listened to somebody. He listened to Moses. Moses asked and he listened and he forgave. So you try doing those things when you're angry. They're difficult. And that's when I realized that God's primary relationship to his judgment, the thing that causes his judgment to go this way or that, more than anything else, isn't his anger like it is with us humans. It's his love. So that means human anger does not produce the righteousness God requires. But anger that seeks to protect what is rightfully its, anger that seeks to communicate, listen, and forgive, anger that seeks to protect relationship, is a little bit different than my typical anger. So I gathered a cluster of grace verses from James. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. 4:5-10 says, or do you think scripture says without reason that he jealously longs for the spirit he caused to dwell in us? But he gives us more grace. And that is why scripture says God opposes the proud but shows favor to the humble. In 5:11, as you know, we count as blessed those who persevered, you have heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. And 5:20, remember this, whoever turns a sinner from the error of their way will save them from death and cover over a multitude of sins. So God's anger seems to be chasing our salvation. It seems to be chasing us, whereas my anger usually seeks to separate and destroy and kill and quarrel and fight, like James was saying. Okay, so if anger can be good or bad, depending on what its motives are, then that means that there is no hard and fast rule about anger, and that every time I am angry, I have to analyze it carefully to make sure that I'm making the right choice, or that I'm listening to anger that is just and not letting human anger control me. And that sounds to me like I'm going to need wisdom, which is okay. Last week we talked about how God promised he'll give us that if we need it. So no worries. We can assume we're going to have that. Let's see. James 3:13-18. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For wherever you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere, peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. And that pure right there in 17, but the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure. That's the word that's holy. That word is holy. So wisdom from heaven is holy. Big box. And then inside that big box, you find peace loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Okay, fun thought. So do you remember how last week we talked about the whole trials making you better thing? And is God doing the trials versus tempting? When you're being tempted, who's tempting you? Is that the devil thing? Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life. But who are you showing? What if you needed to know? What if you needed to know if you were doing a good job because you wanted to do a good job? Then a test is a gift. Then a way to find out if you're doing that is a gift. And I think that's James's argument here. He's saying we should know if our choices are good or not, if our actions are good or not. We should know that about ourselves, because that's the plumb line we're going to use to check and see if we're going in the direction we want to go in. That's what they are. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. So if you love the Lord and you want to live for him, can you look at your life and see deeds done in humility that comes from wisdom? Okay, good. Then maybe you're on the right track. So just a fun thought on tests and trials, and just another spin on that is, yeah, you can be like, "Boo, I don't know, I'm big," but also, what if you want to succeed? You need a way to know if you're going to succeed, and I think that's what James gives us here. Okay, our actions are that test, and the one that shows us if we're not doing a good job or not. So James 4:1 sounds a lot like James 1:13-15. So James 4:1, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Do they not come from your desires that battle within you? And James 1:13-15 says, when tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does God tempt anyone, but each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desires and enticed. You guys hear that? Desires. Our desires, evil desires. That seems to be the problem. Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? By their own evil desires? Okay, so it looks like my desires might be the problem. That seems to be what's happening here. Okay, so what's the fix to my problem? I have an outline for you of chapter 4, verses 1-12. So I'm going to read 1-12, and then I'm going to tell you my outline for what I think it's saying. Okay, ready? Let's play. 1-12, 4:1-12. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? Your desires You desire, but do not have, so you kill. You covet, but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. You do not have because you do not ask God. When you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. You adulterous people, don't you know that friendship with the world means enmity with God? Therefore, anyone who chooses to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of God. Or do you think Scripture says without reason that he jealously longs for the Spirit he caused to dwell in us? But he gives us more grace. And that is why Scripture says God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. Submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Grieve, mourn, and wail. Change your laughter to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. Brothers and sisters, do not slander one another. Anyone who speaks against a brother or sister or judges them speaks against the law and judges it. When you judge the law, you are not keeping it, but sitting in judgment on it. There is only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and destroy, but you, who are you to judge your neighbor? Okay, let me give you an outline of what we just read. Your desires are out of balance and cause bad things, so I'm not going to give you what you want. You're supposed to want me and ask for me, and I really want you to. I long for it. I'm jealous for it. So come to me and I will come to you. I will change what you want. I will change your desires and thereby lift you up. And remember, if you find yourself slandering and judging, you're hurting me again. You're leaving me again. Please don't do that. That's what I think the summary of that section is. That's what he's saying. Okay. So also in 3:13, no, in 4, wait, hold on, where are we? Demonic thinking, that's 3:13 through 18. It says, who's wise and among you? Let them show it by deeds done in humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. Where's that what I'm trying to say right now? Yeah, demonic thinking. Who's up for that? Demonic thinking? Anybody? It's kind of a red flag word. We should probably know what that is. We should probably avoid it. That's probably bad. If God asks us to reproduce with only him, that's pretty intimate. And if we're either reproducing with him or the world, that's what it said. You're either friends with God or friends with the world, which is you're either reproducing, bringing action and things into the world with God or with the world. Then evil and doing sin is a lot more intimate than I like to think about it. You know what I mean? I don't like to think I have a relationship with sin and that I'm making things. It's like a business relationship. I want something out of it. You want something out of it. We do a deal. Get away from me. The end. We're not friends though. And that's what James is telling you. That's just not true. That's not true. You're either being intimate with the Lord and reproducing with him, or you're being intimate with evil and reproducing there. So demonic thinking is intimate. And I didn't like the sound of it before I thought of it that way, but especially not now. And it wouldn't warn us if it weren't easy to get into this pattern, right? Why would it bring it up if it wasn't a problem we might face? So how do I know if my thinking is demonic? See, tests are a gift. We need tests. We need to know if our thinking is demonic. So trials can be good. So, all right. According to this, it seems like I can know my thinking is demonic if it produces bitter envy and selfish ambition. And it seems the section of James seems to be setting up bitter envy and selfish ambition as the opposite of humility that comes from wisdom. So either you have bitter envy and selfish ambition, or humility that comes from wisdom. If it produces peace-loving, considerate, submissive, merciful, good fruit that is impartial and sincere and spreads peace as far and wide as it can, then it probably isn't demonic thinking. And the only test I used to do this, to find out if my thinking was demonic or not, was by looking at actions, right? That's what James seems to be saying the whole time. Your actions and what you think and feel and believe are not separate things. They're all one thing, all one thing. So what do we do if we start experiencing bitter envy and selfish ambitions? Well, you don't boast about it or deny it. Okay. So 4:1 through 3 sounds like a case study of what happens when this thinking takes hold and has its way. So it says, all right, don't think this way, think this way. And then it says, what causes fights and quarrels among you? This is the case study. Okay, so let's say you have demonic thinking. It's going to cause fights and quarrels among you. You're going to kill each other. You're going to want things you can't have. You're going to ask God and you're not going to get them. It's going to be bad. So, what do? We are going to 4 chapters, verse 7 through 10. We're going to submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. Come near to God and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Grieve, mourn, and wail. Change your laughter to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord and he will lift you up. I think that's what the grieve, mourn, and wail. Change your laughter to mourning and your joy to gloom. I think that's the change. Things that used to make you joyful, getting what you wanted, fulfilling your desires, that doesn't make you joyful anymore when God's done with you. That, if that was your life, would actually make you quite sad when you understand and are with the Lord. So I think that's the change he's talking about, that he's going to bring about in our lives. So, all right. Yep. Where were we? So if God changes our desires, and then the proof that he would do that. So I love about James is he'll say things and it does seem like, why did you say that right here? That seems a little random. Like the brothers and sisters do not slander right at the end of that. Like, all right, well, that doesn't seem like quite like you're talking about the same thing, but it's almost like he's adding that test in there again. Don't think demonically. This is what happens when you do. This is how you should think. Here's the test to perform on yourself to find out if you are or not. And that's what that slander business is right there. Are you slandering somebody? Then you're off. Something's wrong. Demonic thinking. Stop it. So, but if God changes our desires, our motives, then we'll be asking for the kind of things he already wants to give us anyway. And that's why we will more often get what we want. Not because it's magic. It's not a magic spell. We didn't trick God. Right? He changed us. He conformed us to his will. So last week I mentioned that we were only guaranteed to get wisdom in James chapter 1. It doesn't say you can get anything. You're short of something, ask God and he'll give it to you. No. It says if you're short on wisdom, ask God and he'll give it to you. And the circle I didn't finish out closing quite for you was the thought that held it all together was, okay, yeah, here's this problem. We're going to ask him for things. Oh, what does this mean? Blah, blah, blah. And it was going to get us back to, we need wisdom to figure this all out. And that's why it's guaranteed, because we need it. And he won't not give us what we need. Right? So, okay. So if he's going to give us wisdom because we need it. So if we ever find ourselves thinking magically again, we should reframe that. Instead of thinking, oh, magically, I'm trying to do a deal with magic. I think it's more repulsive and personally helpful when I think of it as adulterous thinking. As I'm going to go reproduce, I'm going to go make something with someone who isn't the Lord with whom I am meant to do that. Okay. And if you love the Lord, being intimate with anyone else in this way should be repulsive, hopefully. And that is why we can live with peace, knowing that anything God sends must be necessary and nothing can be necessary that he withholds. Because we didn't want anything that was from him anyway. Because last week we talked about trials, and I have to go through the trials to get perfection and lack nothing. But here's temptations. God's doing this. How can we live with this all in peace? Is that we know that we don't want anything that isn't from God anyway. That's how he's going to change our desires. So I think we did the full circle again. We're like, okay, so you're asking for things, but you're not getting them because you have some weird feelings about it. And really, your feelings about everything are kind of the problem, and just how you see the world and the demonic thinking you're doing is really just really awful. And what you need is for God to come in and change what you want so that you can want him, so that he can lift you up and bring you life. And then James gives us these wonderful ways to make sure that we're doing that correctly. So, which is why I say, this week, we might be able to draw the conclusion that holiness is attaching our judgment to our love instead of our anger. Meaning, when we get angry, we try to find a solution. We try to listen. We try to communicate. We forgive. We do what God does when he's angry. And then second, holiness is refusing to continue in a pattern of thinking that leads to bitter envy and selfish ambition. Because it said we can't do those things. So if we're finding ourselves constantly dealing with this bitter envy and this selfish ambition, we're going to choose to think, I'm wrong and I need to ask God to change me. That's what I think holiness is that. And I also think holiness is knowing that bitter envy and selfish ambition are always going to chase you. So we'll continually have to draw near to God so that he can change the motives of our hearts and therefore the things we want. So does anybody have anything else holiness means based on James so far? Does anybody disagree with the conclusions I've drawn about holiness from James so far? They are conclusions I've drawn, or that holiness is reproducing only with God. Holiness is behaving as though God can, wants to, and will do anything and everything he says. Holiness is behaving as though God makes only good gifts and the only good gifts. Holiness is attaching our judgment to our love instead of our anger the way God does. Holiness is refusing to continue in a pattern of thinking that leads to bitter envy and selfish ambition. And holiness is understanding that pattern will always chase us, and therefore we always seek to continue to submit ourselves and draw near to God so that he can change us. Thoughts, comments, questions, concerns?
Jen.
Yes.
As you're reading this, we've all wrestled with the be holy as God is holy. That just seems like a far reach for us. But that verse, humble yourselves before the Lord and he will lift you up. That might be the bumper sticker right there.
That's an interesting point. Partly because of what we're going to look at next week. Next week is our third case study of asking and receiving something from the Lord in James, and it is the weird bit on healing. And it also says, and he will lift you up. Yeah, Mona? Hold on, let her bring you the mic.
Still, I just can't, I'm like Dale. Wednesday night. I don't feel, I'm trying, but I don't feel holy. And I consider myself holy. I'm not worthy to be holy. I just feel that.
Sure. But what we learned already is that our feelings are big fat liars. And that anger can come and it can lie to you. And that inferiority and insecurity can also come and lie to you. And so don't rock the boat. Don't make it hard. That can be a lie too. So just because you have a feeling doesn't mean it's true. And if holiness means these things, these are not feelings. These are behaviors. So well may the accuser roar of sins that you have done. You've heard them all and thousands more, but Jehovah knoweth none. Yeah, holiness can seem like it's up here and you're down here. Well, I think that's why books like James are so important. And that's what we're going to talk about too. So next week, we're going to talk about our last case study. It's going to be the hardest of the specific case studies. I don't know that I'm going to tell you what it means. I'm just going to tell you what he says. There you go. But the next week after that, I'm pretty excited about, because we're going to talk about the other end party that does not get what they ask for. And that's God. God asks for stuff from us all the time. He asks us to reproduce with him. He asks us to do these things, to be this. And I regularly don't. But James does so. That's the question. If this is what holiness means, can we be holy now? We're not going to always feel holy. But according to what James has said, I have no proof that we can't do this. Because if God is going to give us the wisdom we need, he's taught us how to check our thinking. And he's told us he'll give us wisdom over and over again, no matter how many times we need it. Why can't we be holy now? There doesn't seem to be a reason that I can find other than lived experience and my level of suck. But yeah, so fun thoughts. But next week, we're the last case study. Then the week after that, we're going to talk about God not getting what he asks for all the time. And that's going to lead us beautifully into a lot of the other things James says about behavior. And I think we can track them all through who God is. Like our words. James cares a lot about our words, what your mouth does, what your mouth does, what your mouth does. He cares a lot about that. And I think he does it because God chose to give us birth through the word of truth so that we could be a kind of first fruits of all he created. God will never lie. And that's why we can't lie. That's why our words matter, because his do. So I think we're going to see a lot of the reasons certain behaviors are good or bad is because who God is. Because nothing is arbitrary. It's going to be fun, and God is awesome. And thank you for listening. The end.